Welcome to the Women in Vinyl podcast with Jen DiEugenio, founder of Women in Vinyl, and contributor Robyn Raymond. This podcast facilitates conversations with those working in the vinyl record industry to educate, demystify, and diversify the vinyl community.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 32 of the Women in Vinyl podcast. You just heard Pete a Thief by DJ and beatmaker Ray Blevins, who also edits this podcast. Stay tuned for more like this, and in the meantime, you can find some of his DJ mixes on Mixcloud, www.mixcloud.com/RayB45. Huge thanks to Ray for the use of the song and all his hard work to make us sound as good as possible. We're joined by a sort of legend in the community, Mike Dixon, who lives and breathes vinyl. He runs multiple successful vinyl companies based on his longtime love of education, records, outsider art, and repurposing junk into handmade art pieces. He makes records by hand, one at a time, on 1940s record-cutting lathes, runs several record labels, and travels the world teaching crowds at events and festivals the secret art of vinyl record production. Mike's mini vinyl empire is creating living artifacts rooted in a rich history that will travel well into the future. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
I'm so happy to be here.
We've name dropped you a few times, Robyn in particular, but for those that don't know you, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. My name is Mike Dixon. I've been working on the vintage mono record cutters for about 15 or 16 years now. I started out just as a hobby, and it kind of became this obsession. And 10 years ago, I was doing it just for fun. And I did an event at the Henry Art Gallery, and my business partner and I got a call from Converse basically saying, "Hey, can you guys come down to Coachella and cut some dub plates for the band, the XX?" So Converse flew us down to Palm Springs, and we spent the next 3 days cutting records at VIP parties that they would host. And it was tons of industry people. So they're all like, "Oh my God, I have to have this at my party, or my kid's birthday, or my wedding, or my kid's bar mitzvah, or like my film premiere, or whatever." And that was April. And I went back to school. I told them I had the flu. And that was why I was gone. But the week after I got back, my principal came in and handed me a contract, said, "Hey, here's a contract for next year. I need it on my desk if you're going to come back." And, I had all these people that said they wanted record cutting at their parties, but it was kind of it was a long shot. It was kind of a crapshoot. So talked to my wife at the time, and she was like, "As long as we can get out of Olympia," which is where we were living, Olympia, Washington, she's like, "We should do it." So I quit my job. We moved to Olympia, and ever since I've been working on these old machines, training people, cutting records at festivals and events, remanufacturing parts, and just general, and running a record label that kind of specializes in lathe cuts.
Just a couple things.
Yeah, a few things.
and I'll add to that litany of responsibilities as being like my touchstone for when I freak out and like don't know something. Mike is always like my number one. What is this? What do I do? What? And he'll either talk me off the ledge or tell me I'm stupid and to figure it out myself, or give me a really great solution. But he's also the OG guy responsible for me cutting records. because I flew to Detroit to go to the first Making Vinyl conference because Mike was on a panel. And I was like, hey, you do this thing. Should I do this thing? And he was like the only guy in my whole world at that point that was like, yeah, do it. Oh my God, you'd love it. And I was like, yeah, okay, I don't know you, but that sounds great. And I just needed somebody to validate my crazy idea. And he was more than happy, and he has always been more than happy to validate my crazy ideas. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point to kind of segue into the next thing was, you know, both your bio and then what Robyn is saying. You have a love for education, same as we do in vinyl. What made you want to get into teaching people all of the things that you know?
Well, I taught high school for 13 years. I was doing that as a career, as a day job, and I figured, and I loved it. I didn't expect to ever do anything else really. And I was doing the records on the side, but I loved teaching. I love showing people things. I love seeing people get excited about something. I love watching people figure things out and fix it themselves. And so it was just kind of a natural transition. I mean, I for the last 10 years, I've been really having to like hustle to make a living doing this. And, but like I said, I have all these different businesses, but none of them are ever firing on all cylinders at the same time. One of them, it's always feast or famine. And, the record label's down when the for hire lathe cuts, which I don't even think I mentioned. We do short run lathe cuts for other bands too. But when that's down, then maybe the mobile vinyl recorder stuff is up. Maybe the lathe, the machines are in demand. I mean, for example, before the pandemic, we were absolutely swamped with mobile vinyl recorders gigs. Mm-hmm. We had 2020, we had lined up, I think, 11 gigs just from April until August. I wasn't even sure how we were going to do them all because they were all over the world. And then when that died, then all of a sudden bands were doing live streams to raise money. So, we segued into that and started approaching bands and said, hey, you're doing these live streams. Why don't for an extra, $15, $20, you add in a vinyl single component that's made to pre-order. And so we started doing that. And then I had a lot of lathes that were kind of coming out of the woodwork, people that had them forever and hadn't gotten any use out of them, needed the money because they were out of work. So they sold them to me. And then I had all these people that were getting, unemployment and getting grants and things that were looking for something they could do at their house. So then they started buying the machines. So it's all been a real flow, but I've always enjoyed actually training people. And that's probably why I'm where I am, quote unquote, in this whole thing, is because the majority of people in technical hobbies are real gatekeepers. They're usually have very limited social skills, to be generous. And so the fact that I'm, a reasonable person that like wants to actually help people get into the hobby is probably the main reason I'm still here, because there's me and there's one guy in Poland that are willing to train people and, answer questions and, be polite about it. Yeah, I don't know. I love it. I'm about to do my 17th lathe cut camp here in Tucson, where people from all over the world come here and learn to do what I do. A lot of times they're wanting to buy a machine, or they're just wanting to cut their own records and then be done with it, or they're wanting to decide maybe this is for me, maybe this isn't. And I think it's a good idea to do something like that, because like Robyn, when you came to me and said, should I do this? I'm sure I said yes, but then I was probably like, but be ready for this, and this, because I'm a realist, and I'm not going to sell somebody something. I'm not going to talk somebody into doing something without trying to give them the holistic approach of what it is. Because cutting vinyl records it's great, it's fun, but it's probably less fun than you would imagine from the outside.
Well, And Robyn's talked about it a little bit before and like what the job entails, but what are some misconceptions maybe that people have this starry-eyed idea of what it's going to be like to work for themselves and cut people's music? What would you say are some misconceptions that people should think about?
Well, I mean, I think everybody looks at it and they're like, vinyl's hot right now. I can start cutting my own records. I know all
Tomorrow.
these bands, they'll order records from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll get my machine, and then the next day I'll crowd fund, and I'll offer, I'll offer 100 records for $50 and get people to pay me for it, and then I'll buy the machine.
Yeah.
But it's a learning curve. And also it's not, you're listening to the same grindcore or, sad bastard singer songwriter or harsh noise or whatever it is 30, 40 times. And it kind of gets old. In fact, I stopped taking interns from the University of Arizona because every single time somebody would say, "Hey, I want to do an internship," and then they'd come in. I take a week of doing nothing else but training them with the understanding that they were going to be there for the semester and they were going to get college credit and whatever. I'd waste all this time, and then they would just ghost me and stop coming in because they're like, "Well, I like listening to records, but this sucks.
This isn't that." Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
Yeah.
And I think to be honest with you, like, I think that's also kind of happening in the pressing world too. There's people that don't have manufacturing experience that are like, well, I like records, so I'm going to start a pressing plant.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's like, so it's important that for me, because what I don't want is for me to sell somebody a machine with the starry-eyed like idea that they're going to be able to just whoop right off the bat, crank out, records and make a ton of money. Yeah. I tell everybody that wants one, I'm like, look, if you have to do this, if you want to do this for your band, your friends, then you can make a little bit of money on the back end of it. Yeah. But, this is not a get rich quick scheme.
Right.
I mean, I've been doing this for 15, 16 years, and last year was the first year where I even came close to making what I made as a high school teacher. Yeah. And I hustle hard. So, there's money in it, but like it's more like less millionaire, more like shift worker at Hardee's kind of paycheck.
Where would be some resources for people within the community that want to reach out?
Well, as many businesses as Mike has, Mike also has that many websites. So,
So if you want one website that has all of the websites, it's Michael Dixon vinylart.com.
Yeah.
And then you can reach me there and kind of tell me what you're looking to do. And then there's also the Lathe Trolls forum, which if you search for newbie starter guide, I wrote a long starter guide for newbies that answers 90% of the questions that everybody comes to me with. And so now instead of having to like answer those all the time, I can just say, read this and then get back to me. And it's got, and it's a lot. And it's just like with Robyn, it's very balanced in that, like, I'm not blowing sunshine. I'm laying it all out. And I'm kind of, if you want to pursue this, you have to understand these things. And a lot of times it scares people off.
Reading your about on the website, you talk about repurposing junk into handmade art pieces. And then it says about a cassette tape bolted together between two records packaged inside a faux candy bag. So what are some of the craziest materials that you've cut?
So I got my start cutting on plastic picnic plates from Safeway, and that was kind of this little lathe cut secret that a lot of people were doing back in the day. They actually sound pretty good. They have a pretty high like white noise floor underneath the music, but the music translates really well. You get pretty good frequency range. But anyway, so I've done plastic picnic plates. I did a laser disc for the band Dr. Dog, and it was 100% zero waste of any kind, including electricity. The laser discs were found at garage sales. The styli that I used were old styli. The electricity was solar powered. I took all of my machines down to a bar here in Tucson and ran off of their solar power grid.
Wow.
All of the packaging it was a Christmas, so we took the laser disc sleeves with like I don't know, Jurassic Park or whatever on the cover, and then we use paint to paint Christmas hats or candy canes or whatever
on the dinosaur.
Yeah, to make them all Christmas themed. And so that was laser discs. I've done mirrors.
You did a cymbal too, right?
Yeah, I did a drum cymbal for Dale Crover from the Melvins.
Yeah.
It's like a brass 7-inch. We called it a bell-less cymbal. This bass just a brass thing.
Yeah.
But it did work as a cymbal. Yeah, but like for years that was sort of my focus. Here recently I've been too busy to mess with the weird vinyl stuff. And I've just been focusing on like helping everybody else get into doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I've sold probably over 100 machines at this point, and everybody finds their own like niche inside of this niche and their own way of doing it, and they generally stick to that thing. So when I first started selling machines, the guys that worked in my studio that paid rent to use my equipment, they were like, man, you're training our competition, you're giving away all the secrets, and now they're going to take our business. But really, there's tons of business out there. I mean, and this is one of those like rare products where the only thing you have to do to sell it is to let people know it exists.
Yeah.
Because most songwriters don't realize that they can get 20 copies of a record, 50 copies of a record, and they don't have to wait for a year.
Yeah.
And so, by me training people and making sure that they have the correct materials, the correct styli to do what they're trying to do, and they know they can come to me and I can show them how to lower their noise floor or fix their tracking problems or whatever problem they're having, they're turning out better product. So that when somebody goes and buys their first lathe cut, they're not like, this sounds like shit and it doesn't play on my record player.
Yeah.
Because when somebody does that, they're never going to buy another lathe cut. And so just by being able to train people to turn out decent, good sounding records, now it's opening up the business to all of the people that bought one of these from the band that bought them from one of the people that I trained.
Yeah.
So, that's about a bit of a selfish, thing about the education is like, yes, I enjoy doing it, but also it's in my best interest to make sure people are putting out decent records. Because if you really want to do this, then you're gonna figure out a way to do it. But if I can help you get better faster, then you're gonna be putting out better records. And I have I go back and I listen to records I made 12 years ago, and it's like, ugh,
Yeah.
because the technology wasn't there. There wasn't anybody doing this except Peter King, who, by the way, is my OG godfather for record lathes. He's been doing it since the 80s. Anyway, it's in my best interest. It's in everybody's best interest for there to be, for people to be able to make good records, because they're going to do it whether they, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And just like me, I started off and it took me a long time to get good sounding records. And so there's a lot of records that I've released over the years that I go back and listen to, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound that great. But, now over the years, as more people have come into the hobby, I've learned a ton more. I can take these machines apart, put them back together blindfolded. But I learned from my business partner, Chris Dorr, all the mechanical stuff. And then, you know, I worked with all kinds of other people to make this part or that part, you know, various machinists and various inventors and various hobbyists that were like, oh, I figured this thing out. And so, you know, I try to pay that all back because I did a lot of the work, but I didn't do all of the work. And, you know, so I would rather, just because I did all the heavy lifting doesn't mean somebody else should have to too, which has kind of been the traditional ethos in this hobby. Up until about 10 years ago. It's like, you know, I learned myself, so you should learn yourself. Yeah. And that's bullshit, you know. I'm not interested in
that. But yeah, like give us the story of the Peter King.
Well, so Peter King is the godfather of the plastic vinyl, the one-offs. He was doing it in the 80s, long before anybody. I mean, nobody else was really doing it until the early 2000s, but he had been just kind of down in he had a caravan, a little trailer outside of his house in New Zealand that he had his 4 lathes set up, and he would, you know, cut you 20 records if you want. And the first time I ever found out about him, I was at a show, and a band called J Church, who I was a big fan of, and I went up to Lance, the singer, and I said, you know, hey, do you have any vinyl? And he's like, oh, we usually have some live lathe cut LPs, but we're sold out. And I'm like, what is a lathe cut LP? And he was, oh, there's this guy in New Zealand named Peter King, and he'll make you like 20 records if you want. And I was like, what? Are you serious? And, you know, at the time I was doing like some home recording stuff and, you know, had a bunch of friends and bands. And I was like, well, shit, I can get 20 records. So you go and you look the guy up on the internet, and there's a fan page that somebody's created for him because he doesn't use the computer at all. Yeah. Doesn't answer emails, doesn't use PayPal. It's like you have to wire transfer him money. You have to mail him a CD with your drawn labels that he just like photocopies.
It's amazing.
I mean, he's very, very old school dude, but extremely sweet, very nice guy. And so I started ordering records from him, you know, for my bands, for my friends' bands. I started like this little label, and, you know, for a while it was going really well. And then after about a year or two, he, all of a sudden, like records that used to take 3 months to get were taking 6, 7, 8 months. And, you know, and they weren't sounding quite as good. And I was like, oh, this is weird. So I would call him, and you know, and it'd be hard to get a hold of, because like when I first started working with him, I just call him up and then I chat with him for an hour or two, and then but then he started getting harder and harder to get a hold of. So I was like, okay, well maybe I can figure this out. So I started buying machines on eBay. I bought this like crappy Wilcox Gay Recordio from little suitcase thing from a guy, absolute garbage. And, you know, I wasted a couple of years before I finally found a guy in Seattle that was selling a good machine, a Presto 6N. And so I bought that from him. And I kept on like asking him questions. I'm like, but I want to do this. I want to make like records out of picnic plates, CDs, and laser. And he's like, no, absolutely not. You use lacquers and you use cutting styli, and that's it. Like, and I was like, yeah, but no, you can do it. And he's like, I don't care if you can do it. You shouldn't do it.
Don't do it.
And he was like, and finally he's like, you know what? I don't want to talk to you anymore. So he's like, but I have a friend, Chris, that will probably like talk to you. So just you talk to him. Stop emailing me. And so, but he was definitely like, he was the spark of this whole thing. Wow. And so it's, yeah, he will always be my hero.
The first coin-operated jukebox was invented by a man named Louis Glass in San Francisco in 1889. It played cylinder recordings, not discs. Unfortunately, from the documentation I've been able to see, it appears the first machine he made and demonstrated that same year has been lost to time. However, His first public use of his coin-operated jukebox was located at the Palace Royale Saloon on Center Street. It would be 1934 before Wurlitzer would improve upon the idea and create the jukebox as we know it today, with 45s.
You all know by now that Robyn and I are on opposite ends of the record organizational spectrum, but one thing we do agree on is how fantastic Keppel Design's record dividers and record blocks are. Beautifully handcrafted by expert craftswomen in San Francisco, Keppel dividers are sleek, sophisticated, customizable, and built to last. No matter how you organize, Keppel are the dividers to use. Get $10 off your first order of $85 or more using code WOMENINVINYL at checkout. www.keppeldesign.com. That's KOEPPEL design.com. And now, back to the episode.
So with the number of inquiries that you're getting, Mike, like, are you seeing that the gender gap is still like really a thing, or has it started to kind of change a little bit, or is it still like a lot of dudes doing it and not very many women and non-binary people? Or
no, I mean, it's still not 50-50. It's still probably 75% dudes, but
yeah.
I just installed 2 machines in Minneapolis with this company called Out of Wax that's all woman owned.
Yeah.
My former office manager, Bailey from Hocus, Bogus, she's involved. I feel like there's definitely Kara Potiker. I sold a lathe to. I sold a lathe to a woman. What is her name? Kendra Plex in maybe St. Louis. It's kind of hard to keep them all straight, but I feel like there are definitely there are definitely women involved, and it seems to be more and more. I had I generally lathe cut camps are about 5 men and 3 women, like in a row.
That's
so
good,
it's great.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice segue too, because you've got a lathe camp coming up right away, right? And the September one is sold out, and October, do you still have spots, or is that one sold out too?
No, October just sold out too.
Amazing.
And then November and December will be holiday months, so I'm thinking about maybe doing one in January, unless you and I end up going down to New Zealand and see an old pier.
Are you noticing over the last 2 years, especially since the Apollo fire, that like things have increased for you? Like, did you shut down cutting for the label and other kind of orders because of numerous orders, or because you were getting too busy in other, like, installing machines and teaching people?
Oh yeah, so I stopped offering lathe cuts for hire. I stopped advertising it.
Yeah.
I have 15 really good clients that already know how it goes, already know what the product is. They know exactly what I need. They send me everything in one email. I don't have to go back and forth and answer a bunch of questions. I didn't have time to grind out and like find new customers and train and educate these people about what I'm offering. And I didn't need to. So I just said, you know what? If somebody comes to me that's new to the thing and I don't know who they are, a lot of times I send them to Fenn or Zach, who work out of my studio for carrying cuts and lock groups. And then they take care of them. But for me, I don't even cut records myself hardly anymore. I have my assistant Chris that he's good at it. He needs the hours, and so he comes in and cuts them. And I'm able to, because I'm not out there hustling up 20 run, 30 run jobs. My minimum is 50. I keep Chris really busy, but it doesn't take more than 2 weeks for me to turn anything around.
Right.
Nice.
As long as Chris and one of us is in town, it'll be in and out within, 10 to 12 days usually. So, I mean, but we have 4 lathes too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you know, and I think it's important actually to talk about the two differences of lathe cut records.
Yeah.
Because like Robyn, what you do is diamond cutting. It's much more complicated, requires suction and heat. You know, you're actually removing material, and that material desperately wants to wrap itself around your stylus. I personally absolutely hate it. And so I generally don't do diamond cut stuff. I can do it. I have the equipment to do it. Some of the higher end machines that I sell can be modified to do it, but I don't enjoy that part of it. It's much more complicated. It's much more expensive, and it gets to the point where, you know, if your client isn't Nancy Sinatra, you know, they can't afford 500, 1,000.
So what are you using? What's the difference in what you're doing?
So what we do is called embossing, and we're actually scratching the grooves in. It's going to be a little shallower of a groove, but it will still track on a Crosley. The volume's going to be a little quieter. The fidelity is going to be different. I call it mid fidelity, but honestly, if you were playing one of my records and somebody that didn't intimately know that recording walked into the room, they wouldn't notice anything different about it. You know, if you've got a band that sat there in between studio monitors, belaboring every tambourine hit and vibra slap, whatever, then they're going to be able to tell the difference when they hear it playing on a record player. But, you know, most bands are like, yeah, it sounds different, but it still sounds cool.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, my friend Jake, he used to be the guitar player for the Flaming Lips. I've done tons of records for him, and he's told me, he's like, I like your cuts better than our digital master.
Yeah.
You know, it adds a little bit of a grime to it, but it's you know, it's like we worked really hard to get as good of fidelity as possible, and our cuts are, you know, a third the price of what anybody doing diamond cutting can do.
It's true.
So,
yeah,
you know, so if you order a run from a diamond cutter, they're going to sound almost as good, if not as good, as a pressed record, but they're just going to be cost prohibitive for you to like mark them up and then sell them at a merch table.
Yeah.
And so the way that we do our orders is it's all a la carte. You choose your disc, you choose the number of sides, you choose how much audio time is on there. Do you want labels? Do you want like a blank sleeve or whatever? And you can kind of build your own thing to fit your budget. I don't think people really understand what even goes into pressing a record.
Sure.
And I mean, you know, pressing records is a pretty low margin thing as well. So, you know, but honestly, that's why what part of our job is the education of the band that wants the thing.
Yes.
And that's why, because bands come to me, they're like, yeah, we want a round black 7-inch, just like, you know, that's what a record is. I'm like, yeah. But the round, I have to have them CNC'd at the plastic shop. So that's going to add $1. Yeah. Black plastic is much harder to come by than clear plastic. So I've got to add another $1 on that. And, you know, you get 2 5-minute songs. That's a lot of cutting time. Then you want labels in this. So that's going to be like $13, $14. They're like, I can't sell it for that. I'm like, okay, I get it, you know, because
you can do this instead.
Yeah, I'm like, we can do a one-sided clear plastic square. You can do this cool insert thing. Yeah. You know, it's got one song. You pay $5, $6, and you can sell it for 12.
Totally.
And you know, there are a lot of options, but a lot of people, they just don't understand, because they think of a 7-inch as a round black thing that they bought from Black Flag in 1987 when they came through Nebraska. You know, and it's like, that's not what it is anymore.
With all of your traveling and stuff, Mike, like, are you still DJing too? Like,
a little bit. I mean, not so much since the pandemic.
Yeah.
I DJ like obscure, weird country.
Yeah.
You know,
honky
tonk, hillbilly stuff.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my questions for you. Was among all of the things that we've been talking about, you're also DJ Border Loud.
Border
and
Lord.
Lord. Playing obscure deep cut country and honky tonk. So
Right.
I'm curious, what's a track that everybody should know from this type of music?
Oh, like accessible. Hold on, let me. So most of the stuff that I do that I play doesn't like. It's only on these weird 45s that aren't even on YouTube.
I love that.
Yeah, it's
So,
the
to answer to avoid your question, you know, there's a lot of like cool sort of like reissue compilations. There's Light in the Attic Distros, this compilation called Hillbillies in Hell.
Yep.
And I think they're 10 or 11 discs deep now. They've got a ton of cool stuff. There's Dollar Country, the podcast. This guy Franklin does the same thing I do. My taste tends to be more like novelty records and like real weird stuff where it's like some guy decided that he would write a song that Johnny Cash should sing. So then he goes in and records it and makes 107 inches and tries to get it to Johnny Cash. So like that's that. But Franklin's got a real wide range in Dollar Country. So yeah, I'd say check into those. And but we're actually going to be cutting records at the Outlaw Country Cruise.
Awesome.
It goes from LA to Cabo San Lucas and back.
So cool.
So I'm trying to get a DJ spot on there.
When is that?
That's early November, I think.
Cool.
Nice.
So
that's awesome. What a life you live there, Michael.
It's actually pretty good.
I don't know if you've listened to other episodes of the podcast, but we have a question that is really specific and is hard to answer for everybody on the planet all of the time. So that's one of the reasons that we ask it. And being the prolific lathe cutter that you are, you could actually make this happen. And that's why I want to ask you, if you could make a 7-inch of your choice of any song on the A side and any song on the B side to make your Mike Dixon definitive 7-inch, what 2 songs would be on that 7-inch? I guess it would be one side because you would do it on plastic square. You wouldn't even do a double-sided 7.
Well,
right?
but we do double-sided too.
Yeah.
I would definitely do it on a square. I might actually do it on an 8-inch so I could fit 4 songs on there. But I would say that The Burden of Freedom by Chris Christopherson is like that was the theme for me, like taking the jump and leaving,
totally
teaching a job that I knew really well, and moving into this new thing that everybody thought I was insane, including me. And The Burden of Freedom and all Chris Christopherson. I love Chris.
Yeah.
Unconditionally. He's such a great songwriter.
Yeah. And
I feel it so much.
Yeah.
So that would be the A side, would be Burden of Freedom by Chris Christopherson. The B side would be The Dip by Freak Nasty. Because that's my second favorite song of all time.
I love it. Well, so if somebody was to call you today, because you're traveling so much, what's your turnaround time for delivering a new machine?
Of a machine?
Yeah.
Well, I have to wait till after October lathe cut camp because I've got a bunch of people that want them. So I've already got deposits down from 4 or 5 people. Awesome. And then once October's up, I'll have them all ready by then because I'll be home for most of September. I got to go to Paris this week, but then I'm home for the rest of the time, and but then I'm just gonna spend fixing them up. In fact, that's what I was doing before I got on this call, was working on a Presto K8.
Well, and so there's the pitch, friends. If you're listening, get your order in now with Mike Dixon. You can have a lathe for Christmas. you can have your very own lathe for Christmas. And that it's the gift that keeps on giving. Can confirm.
Well, thank you so much, Mike.
Keeps giving something. Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having me.
Mike, you're the best. We super appreciate it. Go fix that Presto, man.
Well,
all right. Safe travels. Nice to meet you.
I'll see you in Austin in October.
All right, cool.
All right.
Bye.
Cool. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Women in Vinyl podcast. You can join our ever-growing list of sponsors. Other record labels: Selector, Couple Design, Eargasm, Groove Washer, Glowtronics, New Gen Audio, and Vinyl Revolution Record Show. And thanks for sponsoring the show. Hey, as always, you can join our conversation on Instagram or send us a note at media@womeninvinyl.com. Clock us. Send us info. If you have a question, we got the answer, or we'll find it. We won't lie to you. And check out womeninvinyl.com for past episodes, the store, the job board, and the library of resources. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us a review on your favorite podcast delivery method. You can also contribute to furthering our mission at patreon.com/womeninvinyl. Hey, guess what? This episode, 45 minutes. You know there was more. You want more? You get more. Go to patreon.com and you can get more. And you'll find all the B-sides, the deep cuts, and the amazing extras, including longer episodes, and contribute to the creation of scholarships and educational opportunities to further the demystification, the infiltration of more women and non-binary identifying humans into the vinyl making space, decreasing those turnaround times every week. Yeah, we love your records. We want you to love them too. womeninvinyl.com.
This episode has been brought to you by Women in Vinyl and Red Spade Records. Thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe, and you can always contact us directly by visiting www.womeninvinyl.com.